G'day, g'day. How you going? What do you know? Don't strike a light. G'day, g'day. And how you going? Just say g'day, 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 and you'll be right.
Welcome to the Midweek End Times News and Trends Briefing as we share major events of what is happening around the world as it relates to Bible prophecy. Today's date is August 8th, 2018. As we start out this briefing, I wanted to start with a devotion that I read the other day from Ray Stedman. Just a fantastic word of exhortation where so many people are at. But in this devotion, it's entitled Painful Love. And it's kind of taken out of Jeremiah chapter 7. And he highlights specifically verse 13, where it says, "While you were doing these things, declares the Lord, I spoke to you again and again, but you did not listen. I called you, but you did not answer." And so the devotion goes like this. The first thing that God does when you begin to drift is to warn you of what the consequences are going to be. He is faithful to tell you that if you sow to the flesh, you will of the flesh reap corruption. There's no way to escape it. Even forgiveness for it doesn't remove that. So if you sow to the flesh, you will reap in the flesh corruption. Sin will leave its scars even though the wound is healed. God warned you that there is going to be hurt in your life, hurt in your heart, hurt in the loved ones around you. There's no way of escaping it. But then he says, but I called you, but you did not answer, as the rest of chapter 7, verse 13 of Jeremiah mentions. The call of God is a picture of love seeking a response, reminding you of who He is and how much He loves you, trying in various ways to awaken a response of love and gratitude to call you back. He is like the father in the story of the prodigal son, watching the horizon for the son to return, longing for him to come back. This is the picture of God, looking after men and women, boys and girls, being faithful to them, longing to have them back, calling them again and again. And this is a picture of the grace and the patience of God. This may go on for years in the case of an individual. All of this, he asks us to pray for those like this, to reach out to them by the power of prayer. But when that doesn't work, he has one step left in the program, judgment. You see, judgment is not God's way of saying, I'm through with you. It's not a mark of abandonment by God. It is the last loving act of God to bring you back. It is the last resort of love. It's tough love sometimes. As C.S. Lewis puts it very beautifully when he says, God whispers in our pleasures and He speaks in our conscience, but He shouts in our pains. It is His megaphone to arouse to a deaf world. Every one of us knows that there have been times when we have not been listening to God, would not pay attention to what the Word says, saying until one day God puts us flat on our back or allows us to be hurt badly, and then we begin to listen. And that is what Jeremiah had to learn. He needed to understand that this nation that had reached the place where there is one thing that would heal it. And the only chance it had left was the judgment of God, allowing the hurt and the pain of invasion and the loss of its national place. And that is why earlier in the chapter, he commanded that prayer for the people cease, but that the preaching continue. Prayer delays judgment, but preaching hastens it. What this nation needed to restore it and heal it was judgment. And so God says, don't delay it. Don't hold me back. This is what I will do the work. Radical surgery is all that is left. And those can be tough words to hear, but it is so true. And so not only do we need to be praying, but we need to be preaching and telling and living out the gospel. Amen. And that's a word for today, a great word of exhortation for each and every one of us. Now, in today's End Times news briefing, there's several different interesting news reports that have been brewing in dealing with the region of the Middle East. Again, we see out of the Jerusalem Post how Hamas political leadership supports agreement with Israel. So in this report, Hamas has decided to endorse a staggered ceasefire with Israel, which will begin with an end of launching the inflammable kites and balloons in exchange for Israel lifting some of the latest sanctions imposed on the Gaza Strip. Hamas sources said that in exchange for the cessation of all these attacks against the border forces or fences, Israel would open the Kerem Shalom crossing to transfer of goods and the fishing zone, which would be expanded. And so the two sides would then proceed to a second stage that would include a prisoner exchange and parallel the beginning of a large infrastructure projects in Gaza and preparations for the lifting of the blockade on the Gaza Strip. A senior Hamas official also announced that the whole agreement with Israel must be approved by all the Palestinian factions. And so in response to the Fatah party leadership has accused the organization of suspicious agreement with Israel. Hamas has made no mandate to make agreement with Israel because it does not represent the Palestinian people, a senior Fatah official said. And this is one of those negotiations that you're seeing taking place within the region, and at some point I'm sure that some of these other agreements will be in the peace deal that will eventually be made at some point. But they're so close to eventually getting a deal at some point, from whether it's the Trump deal or there's some other negotiations that need to be made. But certainly within the region, they're looking for some sort of agreement or covenant or peace deal to be made with Israel, with the Palestinians, Hamas, Hezbollah. So within that area, certainly there's going to be something that's going to be taking place in the very near future. And that also leads us to another interesting article that Trump increases staff for Israeli-Palestinian peace team. This also came out of the Jerusalem Post that says that Donald Trump has added staff to the Middle East peace team ahead of its rollout plan for resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The White House policy team, currently centered on the three of the president's closest advisors, is recruiting staffers from other government agencies to help them message the plan publicly. And so they seek expert units, the plan's political elements, as well as the economic components, according to the Associated Press. And so the administration has been working on the plan for more than a year in a bit now, but a few details are known of its contents, and so the team has yet to decide when it will begin to roll out or how, including whether they preview it with the parties before releasing it publicly, and that will prove difficult with the Palestinians, which have cut off contact with the White House after Donald Trump had recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital back in December 6th last year. And so the members of the team are broadly describing the plan as detailed, pragmatic outline for resolution on the conflict, heavily focused on the economic revitalization of the Palestinian territories, on Israel's security guarantees. And up until now, they have avoided using the term two-state solution, which has led Palestinians to believe the plan will not explicitly endorse their sovereignty claims. And so this is important, again, because we're seeing more and more of these pieces of the puzzle of the peace plan that will eventually be implemented, and whether this is the deal or the covenant that will be in place for the Antichrist, are not quite sure, but we're getting closer and closer to seeing this sort of agreement. I do believe that there will be a war that will be breaking out, whether it's Ezekiel 38 or the Psalm 83, and they will certainly want to put a peace plan in place. And at that point, I believe the Antichrist will eventually sign a covenant, and he will assume power and leadership within this. Anyways, that's something just for us to continue to pay attention to and what's going on. On to some other news items around the world. Again, not only do we see earthquakes in various places, but there was this magnitude of 7 earthquake that shakes Indonesian island, at least 91 dead at this point of this particular report. And so this happened near Bali. And it was around 11:40-ish local time. The earthquake was estimated 6.5 miles deep, and there was close to what they said, over 200 people injured, while another 20,000 people were placed on shelters due to thousands of homes and buildings suffering damages. And this is one of those things that we do see in these end times, the earthquakes in various places, the magnitude, the frequency, and just one of those things that it just continues to be the signs of the times that we see and noticing what's happening. On another issue, and that's happening here in Australia, is that they're in a land of drought. And according to this article that talks about the farmers and how they're going through this immense difficulty going through drought. And so he announced this package to try to help stricken farmers. And within the new package, he provided an extra 140 million in payments to farmers and mental health support, and brings the total amount of government funding to 576 million, which is great. And this is what the farmers need to help them through the situation. But still, the drought is going to continue. It'd be great to develop some sort of system to irrigate those areas. But we do see this is not only going to affect the economy, it affects the food supplies, it affects the country in a lot of ways. And again, when we first moved here to Australia, they were in drought, and then we've had some real heavy rains over the last several years. And so that kind of helped fill the dams out. And then they built a desalination plant off the coast here, not too far, about an hour from our place. And they're piping in some of that water into the system as well. So that is something that would be helpful out in that area, is to take the water and to do irrigation. But that's a whole nother subject. And again, but we see drought, not only here in Australia, but a lot of other places around the world. You see that there's going to be pestilences and diseases. You're going to see famine that's going to hit around the world. And this would be one of those things you can see the drought can affect and start a famine within a nation, like so many other countries have experienced. So this is something that, again, we just need to be praying for provision and for rain to hit those areas where they're going through remote drought. Let me close with this. And one of the greatest attacks, and I'm starting to think about this because I'm seeing so many reports coming up, and that of censorship and silencing our voices as Christians and as conservatives. And so something that we're seeing more frequently on a daily basis and weekly basis, and it's getting worse and worse. And so from YouTube channels, Twitter accounts, Facebook, websites, many other forms of media are either being deleted, blocked, or being censored. And so the reason is because those powers behind some of those companies who are very liberal, left-wingers, and Democrats, so those who live in the States, who don't like to be called out, they don't like the truth, they don't like Christians or conservatives or anything that has moral values or goes against their line of thinking or their worldview. So they want to silence that. They want their opinions to be known, but they don't want to have a healthy debate or hear the other side. And so we're seeing that the mainstream media, the Democrat politicians, you're seeing this on a regular basis. Celebrities, they're all teaming up to get the violence, to increase that, spreading lies and hate, and they make up all kinds of interesting stories that are just not true, to lie to the people. And so, I want to close with this. While we all have a platform to one degree or another, whether it's Snapchat or Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Real Video, which is going to be our alternative YouTube. If anything does happen, we've got another place to put our material. Vimeo, blogs, websites, you name it. There's all kinds of platforms that people can use to voice their opinion, to share the facts, to share the stories. And so let's make our voices heard. Let's speak the truth. Let's start a movement so that we can't be silent. So we need to be more vocal than ever before. We need to keep putting stuff out there like never before, because we may have a shorter window than we thought we would have. And so we need to, put people in powerful positions so we have them that can make a difference in the laws of the land, or finding out some of the stuff that goes on in some of those Senate hearings, like they did with the Facebook and the breach of data information. But we need to be careful. But we need to let our voices be known and not be silenced. Amen? And that's it for today's briefing. Until next time, God bless.